Steph speaking.
What's going on, Steph?
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Enjoying some cooler weather here in the Carolinas, but weather to me is what makes writers write better books.
You might be onto something there.
Let's talk about your book, Everything Left to Remember. This book is coming at a beautiful time because as we are growing with this generation, we're losing a lot of our parents to Alzheimer's. This is something that we never spoke of when we were younger because it wasn't the word, it wasn't the path. These days, we're embracing it even more, and a book like this really does open a door.
It does. And I think exactly what you've just said is so important. I think the disease wasn't as prevalent in the past, and also there was a lot of stigma around talking about it. And I think we're seeing that open up, and it's such an important thing to do for raising awareness, for medical advances, for moving into the philanthropic side of things, and also, most importantly, to give the people who are caregivers, a really huge sense that they're not alone in this.
To write about it, because my last book was basically, I had this book idea that John Lennon was still alive, but what I was going to do with his character was give him Alzheimer's to prove that creativity is still alive. Well, Glenn Campbell's family reached out to me and said, you have no idea. Creativity is alive when the imagination is going. And so did you go through the same experience?
Oh, I've never been asked that question before. It's so beautiful. I feel like when I have watched my mother move through various stages of the disease, if I'm able to kind of get myself to the other side of the excruciating part of loss and grief, which is not every day I can do that, but when I can, I would absolutely say yes, creativity is alive on the other side. And not only is it alive on the other side, but there is a really amazing way of using it to continue to create a sense of connection and belonging with the person, with your loved one. And so my mom used to describe the clouds in a particular way, like a kid, like it would be like being with a child who's like, I see a bear in the clouds, And if I can go with that instead of being like, no, you're seeing things that's not actually there, which is what a lot of us adults do. Absolutely, there was an imaginative and creative space that still to this day with her is, I think, much, much more widely open inside of her, inside of me, and inside of the relationship that this disease has kind of, in many ways forced us to go to the road that we've been forced to go down.
For you to take the trips through the national parks, I can't imagine what she was seeing with the shapes of the mountains or even the trees and everything that was going on there.
Yeah, I mean, this is the combination right now. We're talking about the combination of creativity and the awe and wonder that's available to us in nature. And for me, that was such a magical component of the trip that I went on with her. So when we went, she was in, very early stages of early onset Alzheimer's. So we're talking about, a pretty fit and active woman in her late 60s, able to go, rafting on a gentle rafting trip or horseback riding or going on hikes, etc. And I feel like the combination of being surrounded by that kind of big nature was really the container that, as I said before, if I can get to the other side of my grief, the excruciating parts of this disease and what we're losing, and move into a container that's holding us in something larger, that access to connection and creativity is so much more available. And so I think nature, in the national parks that we went to, was a really big part of that container, Wow. This is such an open book of honesty for so many people that are still seeking even after their challenges. Everything Left to Remember is the name of the book. But the one thing, I wish my sister could have had this book because she was the caretaker for my father, for my brother, and my mother. Oh, wow. And I think all three of them combined invited her to come home. And so I mean, that's why this book touches me. Because I didn't know, and you're that person that does know, and for you to put this in book form, it is medicine for us. It really is. Thank you for saying that, and I believe it to be also, medicine. I think there's something, I'll give credit to my mom, right? Because there's so much of her in this book. But there's something about this book, I feel like, that allows us to move through a bit of the breaking open process that, we're already really in the midst of. At the very same time, I think it's the kind of book that allows us to feel held. Like, it's not the kind of story that's just the breaking open, that's just the pain.
Right.
It's also, there's kind of some way, and again, I give this credit to my mom, is, how do we be held inside of that? And I think, outside of Alzheimer's, outside of the dementia community and other long-term degenerative diseases, isn't that a question that we are all faced with, is in the ways that we're watching ourselves break open and this world break open, and a lot of the things that we've moved through over the last handful of years as a collective and individuals within it, how are we to be held through the breaking?
Mm-hmm. Horseback riding with your mother. Did you have a moment where, when she was riding, that you were the parent and she was the child?
Oh, I think absolutely. In horseback riding, I think in many, many different situations, there is a role reversal that happens inside of this disease and inside of a lot of different diseases, that absolutely you're stepping into a more parental, a more caretaking role. That being said, I still think her wisdom, even if she couldn't express it in the exact same ways that she always could, kind of trumped mine, if that makes sense. So I might have had to remind her to bring her purse or grab the granola bar or hold on to the horse's handles this way, like a parent would. But her ability to bring me into a larger sense of my own maturity was still the mothering presence, for sure.
Are you writing your own story? And I ask that because I'm a daily writer. I journal every day. And the reason why is because I'm sure I started because of the notebook. And the notebook changed a lot of people's lives. And I thought, I have to write so that maybe one day it can be read back to me.
Yeah, I mean, I journal and write all the time. And I do it in various different ways. I do it in my own journals. I do it, by way of Instagram. A lot of times I do it by way of newsletters. I've written another book that came out a handful of years prior to this. So that kind of creative practice and getting to the place, this is the most exciting thing for me as a writer, is trying to get to the place where my own story, like my own lived experience, because I'm a personal narrative writer, is surprising me. I could tell, there's a lot of stories that I tell myself that I live within that actually, to be frank, I kind of hide within. Yeah. That are patterned, I've told this story 1,000 times. This is the narrative of my growing up. This is the narrative of my victimhood. This is the narrative of my empowerment. This is, but as a writer, what I'm really looking to do is to kind of drop those. Yep. And come to a place on the page where I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize the depth of that. I didn't realize the connection point of that. And so to be in a writing process that is attempting to surprise me with my own story is definitely a kind of, I don't know whether I'd say everyday goal. I'm not necessarily an everyday writer, but a very common one, a very practiced one.
Doesn't that come to you though through stream thinking, where all of a sudden it's like, whoa, did I just really write that? Oh man, where'd that come from?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we're hearing a lot of this being talked about, really openly now is the idea of flow states, right, in writing and in creativity in general, in music making, in art making, in film making, photography, everything. And I think that was a really big gift of, growing up the way that I did. I was involved in athletics a lot. And so I was really, really familiar with the physical flow state. Mm-hmm. And I think the day that I figured out how to apply that to creativity, that happened, I don't know, probably 2013, 14, was just mind blowing for me, that I could access the same kind of, I'm all here, I'm fully embodied, but I'm also in kind of a meditative flow state. And oftentimes in that state, I'll read back things that I've written in those kind of places creatively, and I'll think I don't remember writing that.
That's and that's what I love. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever get caught up in talking in your sleep? Only because I'm constantly writing, I'm constantly creating, and I'm always my wife goes, you were talking about blah 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 last night. I'm going, because the writer won't stop. He always has to have a voice.
The narrator just won't stop going. I haven't been accused or complimented by my ability to talk in my sleep, but if I am immersed in a writing project that's as sizable as something like a book, absolutely, I wake up like the liminal times, right? Just before I fall asleep and just as I'm waking up, like I have to have a notepad by my bed. Like absolutely. And the same thing if I use meditation to kind of move in and out of those kind of places often. And there has to be a notepad, my phone with the notes app, that type of thing, beside the bed for sure.
I'm so with you on that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because creative people that are listening, they need to understand that creativity is something that meditation does help along. And it kind of soothes the pain as well as it opens up doors. And I do a thing called Nidra, which is what. Oh, yeah. Oh, you could. I'm so glad you're familiar with it.
Yeah,
because Nidra is like, I invest a lot of time in that so that it helps me out when I'm out doing what I call a transition walk through the forest and stuff, because you've got to be able to let that creativity speak.
Absolutely. I mean, if people are a little bit, wary or scared or don't really know, like, oh my gosh, meditation, that seems so intense, or that seems very ooey wooey or whatever, the first place that I always direct them to is many of us have experienced while we're driving, while we're in the shower, ideas come to us. And that's a great place that, like, you're doing something that your muscle memory is so intact that your brain can kind of relax a little and go elsewhere. Right. And so that's it. That's the phase. Now imagine if you practiced that. Right. And so for me, Nidra is a great way. I really love moving meditation. So like long walks in the forest, that type of thing. I also love, there's a handful of different guided meditations. That is a absolutely critical place to kind of allow enough safety, regulation, expansiveness, releasing of the ego, surrender, on board to allow the larger things to come through.
Wow.
And that's a really has become a really important part of the creative practice.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Where can listeners find more about you, about that book you were talking about, the one that you wrote a few years ago versus the one that we've got right now? Because I want people to really get to know who you are.
Yeah. So the first book is called Unbound, and it was about a record-breaking ski trip I took. So that is it is a year basically of moving meditation. And they can find that anywhere you find books. Everything Left to Remember, of course, is what you've already mentioned, is the book. It's out in paperback next week. I'm really excited about that. Any bookstore, any place that you find your books. And people can find me online, stephjagger.com, or on Instagram, stephjagger.com. And highly encourage people to reach out. There's a human being on the other end of all this.
I love it. Please come back to this show anytime in the future, Steph. The door is always going to be open for you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for your time and just your heart that you put into all this.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
You too.